Hey everyone, welcome to the Music Addict Podcast. Of course, myself, Tom McDonough, and my co-host,
Mark Taylor.
Yeah, I love that. I used to do that to all my co-hosts before, by the way, Mark. Yeah, I always like putting him on the spot right there. Ultimately, this is show 2. Our guest this week is Robert Eibach, who is a Grammy award-winning producer. We always try to I figure we'll throw a few different people in music in different parts of the music industry and hey, why not go production?
And he's such a cool one because not only is he a Grammy Award, but he does a lot of remixes, right?
Yes, he does a ton of
remixes. Talk about finding your niche. I mean, that's cool. I'm always telling people that there's a lot of ways to earn a living in this business. And, you know, when you're earning Grammys by doing remixes, that's outstanding.
Yeah, and look at Zed. Zed's done so well doing somewhat very similar with his songs with many, picking lots of female vocalists. He did really well with doing that for quite a few years. It seems to be a niche that is production-wise. Remixes is one. Obviously, most people, and like yourself, do obviously studio production. And of course, unfortunately, everyone hears about the people who do remixes and people like Zed who do, songs. But in the production studio, most people don't know the names of the producers behind many of the favorite, big songs that if it wasn't for them, the songs wouldn't have turned out the way they did. So my hat's off to everybody in the studio. One thing, and I'll say this out loud, I wish I could see more of females in the studio.
Yeah, that they're unicorns. You really don't see very many of them, and it's a shame.
Yeah,
I know a couple of female engineers that are outstanding. I know some female writers that are outstanding. I don't know a lot of female producers, and my door is always open. I'd love to have more female producers.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the wonderful island, Chicago. So,
well, thank you.
You're welcome. Good. I always like to plant those things in there. So quick overview of our last, month of what we've been doing at Music Addict. Obviously, we had some pretty cool stuff going on there between the podcast and newsletter, all our great featured articles, our spotlights that we do on artists. And obviously, one of the things that we'll go forward and continually do is the recording studio, songwriters, producers, venues. Anybody out there who's got a venue, got a recording? Anybody's got anything that's in something in music, even the touring companies, anything to do with the music industry, get with us. We would love to do reviews on a lot of different things. And go to the website at musicaddict.org and send a message to us. We got a help desk there. We'll take a look and see if we can put it in process. Of course,
it's so hard to find. Right, it's so hard to find people in the industry that are really good at what they do. Everyone will make a claim to be this, that, and the other. So we like to talk to people, kind of give them a chance, especially if they're not big names in the industry. Give people a chance to know who you are, know what you do, learn about you, learn about your facility, with the hopes that we can just draw attention to people who aren't just the big names.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, everyone should be able to be featured at some point, and for all the highlights, regardless if you're big or small, people deserve the accolades of being recognized for things they do, because not always is everyone super famous. Doesn't mean you ain't good at what you do.
It certainly does not.
So when we were talking about how we were going to come through in this one, we talked about, obviously, we did a big article on the difference between executive producers and producers. Just for the short, real quick, we did a very long version of and breaking that down, but I'll give the quick synopsis. Executive producers, obviously, on any kind of track, movies, anything to that effect, the people who are the money men or money women. I just shouldn't discriminate there. And the same thing is, the money people, yes. And the obviously the producers are the ones that do all the hard work in the engineering teams. And one of the things you made a valid point, and we were discussing that, was the differences. You were saying what has changed between producers and engineers and how that kind of blended more than it's been separated before.
Isn't it crazy? Because now, Tom, I'm not trying to age us, but back in the 80s, the engineer didn't do nearly as much producing as the engineers do now.
Yeah.
Often when I have people come into the studio, they'll bring their own engineer, and the engineer's writing the track. He'll produce it. He will add beats. He will do so much more than just engineering that I have a hard time just calling them engineers. They're introducers. They do it both.
You can create a new term for the industry. We'll coin that.
That really is. Yeah, that really is what they're doing. They're not just engineering. They're not just producing. It's kind of this new hybrid. And it's cool to see. I'm old school, so I kind of like when there were more ears. But this new way of doing it, everybody just comes in and the engineer wears way more hats. Mm-hmm. They're engineering, they're vocal producing, they're producing the beat. And it's amazing how far the engineer's seat has moved.
Yeah, it is so interesting to see how that's evolved along with how the music industry has evolved as music has evolved from the 60s to today, and how all of it has come forth. And you're right, even more artists are coming out, doing more production for themselves. Less, again, with the age of digital age of computers have changed the ability for more people understand the concept of producing and engineering than playing an instrument. So it's interesting how that shift is gone. Today people play.
You're not gonna bait me into talking about the new musicians. You're not gonna bait me in, man. You're not going to. But I do find that I find more people who are skilled at programming than I find that are skilled at their instrument anymore. This is not a better or worse, but they spend way more time working in FL Studio than they spend working on a guitar or a keyboard or, whatever their instrument was. And that's fine, but it's certainly different.
And AI has obviously put a big, interesting change in the last 6 months. In all this spin too as well. AI can pretty much do anything you want it to do until they decide to put a restriction on that. Right now, it's growing exponentially fast.
Man, that's a whole show right there.
Yeah, that's a whole. God. Yeah, so that's something we'll have to talk about in the future. We'll have to have a whole. Actually, we'll get somebody who's an expert for AI just to discuss that alone.
I'm a big fan of AI.
Yes, you and I both. Like I always say, keep your friends close and your enemies closser. AI is our enemy because it could take all our jobs.
It probably has. We just don't know yet. Yeah. I don't even know if we're real, Tom.
Yeah, we're in the digital. You're right. We're in a simulation.
Oh, we're not going to open that rabbit hole either.
So obviously with Eibach, it is awesome. I've known him for years. Robert's he's very talented. I always love to talk to a lot of people who have been very talented in the industry, especially behind the scenes. Again, most of every single great project had great people behind it. And that's generally where, I've spent a lot of my time talking to a lot of people behind the scenes because nothing could be done without them. So it's great to get to talk to a bunch of producers, over the years, talk to a bunch of producers. I hope to get quite a few on the show, as much as we have artists, as much as we have everything else. And heck, it would be great to have a couple of people who own venues discussing the changes since COVID.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some of them were struggling, but there's some ways of finding different routes and avenues to stay afloat. But yes, I mean, other than I will plug us one more time, Music Addict for consulting artists, anybody in the industry, we consult for just about everything. We just lowered our hourly consulting fee for 1 hour consult to $50 from $100. So
nice.
Definitely check us out. musicaddict.org. I always I know I'm plugging it too much today. Other than that, I think we've covered quite a bit of where we're going on the website. I cannot wait to see how this month's newsletter comes out. I'm putting it closer to the holiday because of the fact that, more Christmassy. I thought the holiday was really cool. Christmas is big, Thanksgiving was big, and Halloween was big. And they all were at the end of the month. Funny how that goes, huh?
Yeah.
And then the rest of the holidays are all at the beginning. So, ultimately, I hope everyone is, enjoying our podcast, and definitely keep listening and give us your ideas. If you want someone on the show, let us know. We have our next guest after this, and show 3 is going to be White Snake's guitarist.
Nice.
Yeah, so I always like to, Joe Hostra, especially I wanted him towards Christmas because he's in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra as well. So,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's such a great. That is a staple of Christmas.
It really is.
So, without further ado, on to our interview.
All right. See you on the other side.
And I have an awesome guest this week, Robert Eibach. I always want to say, they want to put the I silent, and I have for years. Every time I say it out loud, I always have to recorrect myself. I don't know how many people do that to you, but
my whole life.
Yeah,
my college applications, I would get back. They're saying Mr. Eibach or Mr. like this or that. Like you're college.
Like,
you're
right.
College. How do you?
So you have and your title goes a million ways: remixer, producer. You've been Grammy nominated. You have won Grammys with, if I'm not mistaken, from early 2014. You had one with
So I've been.
How many have you won actually?
So I've been part of 1, 2, 3 winners. As far as the Grammys are very interesting in how it works, and I think a lot of people get it really confused. So certain categories do certain things, and depending on the category, the winner might just be the artist, or it might be the producer. But I've worked on records, contributed and produced songs on records and albums that have won. So 3 different ones. The first one was Wouter Kellerman and Ricky Kej. They had a new age album called Winds of Samsara, that one. Then I was part of, I did some remixes for Ariana Grande, and her album Sweetener had one. And so I had contributed to that, and I have plaques for these and stuff. And then
cool.
Lucky Diaz and the Family Jam Band won a Latin Grammy in 2019, which I contributed to. And then we've been doing things together since 2015. And then I, formally really joined the group the last few years and have actual nominations under my belt, with my name on them for the past couple years. So as far as officially in the Grammy books on the website and all that, there's 2. And then I've been part of, I'd say 15 3 wins, and then, maybe 15 nominations throughout there. So it's been it's been a really, really amazing, fun ride. I know that was a really long explanation for how to get there, but sometimes it's really confusing because, there's so many people that can contribute to a record, and the way that the Grammys kind of work it out is okay, these certain categories, the artist gets it, or the producer, and then the producer who did 51% of the record, or the engineer that did, but then you have all these, a hip hop record or a rap album can have, 100 different writers and producers and all kinds of things on it.
150 plus on average, and some of those, yeah.
And everyone has contributed their work, and everyone deserves that recognition. So I think that's why the Grammys came up with their participation plaques and certificates that they give to all the people who are have contributed to those albums in one way or another. So yeah, it's amazing no matter what. I mean, it's really an amazing experience to be involved in that process and to be recognized for the work that we all do. It's just really, it's humbling, and it feels like, when someone asks you, how does it feel? It's like, well, it feels kind of exactly how you think it's going to feel. I mean, it feels pretty amazing. There's a wave of emotions that goes on with it, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I try myself to give, myself some time to kind of really, take it all in and appreciate what went into that and also what it is, so yeah, I'm sorry for the long answer.
You bring a highlight to something. It takes a team to make most hits happen. The best example is Taylor Swift has a huge team that makes Taylor Swift who she is, the music what it is, and how it goes. And that model hasn't changed for eons. Going back to Elvis, there was a huge team behind him that made him who he was. So it's the model's been there. It's just, you're right. Most average people who are fans or listeners don't know how much goes into the behind the scenes work to make hits happen. And I agree. You're right. There should be, thank God the Grammys did come out with the participation plaques, because I think you're right. There's so many people involved, regardless if it's a producer that was on something for 3 seconds to someone who worked on it, the whole 3 minutes, or, the whole section of it, or, worked in the bridge, or worked, in the chorus, or whatever the dynamics of that type of work was into it. You're right. So many engineers and producers take to do things, because not one person can make something just magical.
Right, exactly.
You still need the singer, you need a band, you need lawyers, you need producer, the engineer, songwriters. There's so many people.
It's a whole thing. It's very similar to watching a movie, and you see at the end of it, there's 5 to 10 minutes of credits rolling. Every one of those people had like a pretty, significant, important role into making that happen. That's why their names are there. That's why they're recognized for what they do.
You mean it's not like Wizard of Oz and Dorothy is the only character in it that anyone remembers?
Exactly.
So you grew up in Pennsylvania.
I did.
So back in the 80s, what music made you, or 80s and early 90s, what drove you to want to go into music?
Well, the 80s, I was very, very small. So not very.
That's why I kind of dropped that back. Yeah.
But even so, like in the, when I was going through high school, and, in the late 90s and early 2000s, when I was in college, it was, I had always done bands with my friends, and had really, been interested in music and recording music, and never really thought of it as a career. I thought of it as, oh, this is fun. We're doing things, and it's fun. And I actually went to college for biochemistry. I wanted to be a doctor. Yeah. But and I wanted to, cure cancer and do all of those things. And when I got into that kind of a lab, I was really bored. It wasn't something that I was really, I love it. I really do love it. And I'm that person that read the medical journals during COVID and did all of that stuff. But it wasn't something that was so passionate of mine that I really wanted to take it to, being the career for the rest of my life. And I had friends I went to Temple University in Pennsylvania, and my friends were in the film program, and they, one of my friends was like, hey, in this department, there's a music production thing. And I music production degree. It was really called Broadcasting, Telecommunications, and Mass Media, but there was a focus on music production in there. And within an hour, I was in in my advisor's office switching my major and getting all the things signed over. I was like, I'm switching it. Like, this is really, and I never really, I guess, I never turned back. It was, I was just one of the best decisions I ever made in my life was doing that. And it was really, Temple University is known as, they have a really great, media, school there, and one of the best in the country. And, so I got a really good education on it. And, beyond that, I had an internship that turned into me being an engineer at a studio in Philadelphia called Third Story Recording.
Well, yeah,
just a legendary studio out there. Had Ray Charles recorded, all kinds of legends, and really got a lot of. I learned a lot being hands on, as far as how to produce, and even having all that information that I had in Philadelphia, it was when I moved to LA, it was more like, it was like starting from scratch almost. And I had, when I was in Philadelphia, I talked with a producer named Swizz Beats. We were doing a session together, and he pretty much said that to me. He's like, when you move out to LA, like you're gonna, you just be prepared to start from scratch, kind of. And I did, like, I took that advice, and I often, when people ask me, what's the advice that you can give? It's like that, like, you are not bigger than the room. Like that's really what it comes down to. No matter how talented you are, there's going to be someone that's more talented, and learn from them. And when I got out to LA, I had met David Longoria, and, he taught me so much about how to be a producer and how to work with artists, and how to really, get the most out of artists, because he had learned from Quincy Jones, who's like the greatest of all time, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So it's just like, I'm very blessed to have the experiences that I had, and I just oftentimes just feel like, okay, this is like the path that I was supposed to take, because all these things, and it was very, very, I'm not going to say it was easy, because it really wasn't. It was very hard. I mean, there's struggle after struggle after struggle. But I definitely had some really great people in my life giving me great advice as to what to do and how to really, survive it and get through it. And I met some great collaborators, and I have Grammy nominations and part of Grammy winning records and #1 records and all these things, that are a result of that. So I really, appreciate what everyone's done for me to, like, give me the opportunities to really show what I can do. And also when I feel like I am really good, humble me too, so there's those things as well. So, but it's all an experience. It's all a journey. And really it's about, giving it your all and sticking with it, because really, good things eventually do happen,
Yes, and it does. And I've known you a very long time. Matter of fact, back into the WROM days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so back in those days, it's been a long time, and you were I have to admit, one of the most humble people I know out of all these things. You've got all these things, many accolades of what you've done, but yet you have been one of the most even-keeled, straight people, and probably very approachable out of, compared to the industry's big. But it's
very big.
Small. In a very small community at the same time. And, you run into different types of people all throughout the walks of life. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing when you get to meet people and they've been even killed no matter what. Like you said, you and I have the same philosophy of always on that. There's always someone bigger and better, always. Mm-hmm. And it has always kept me grounded. I'm just, I just do my thing, and I do the best I can. And,
for sure.
And if no one likes it, okay, whatever. I mean, it's, sometimes you have fun with certain things, and some things work and some things don't work. And it's just part of the alchemy process of putting it all together.
I love that word. Yeah. It's and it really is that,
And the genres have changed since we've, since we've known each other. The genres have changed from the 2000s through now. I mean, it has gone in the 23 years of the 2000s. The music trend has changed. I mean, you got, you got all that stuff from the pop changing into alternate, rock. You've got kind of, you had Michelle Branch era. Then you started going Matchbox 20, and you got, things kept changing. Hinder took off in that time period in the late, and you started changing all these different sounds. But ultimately, it hasn't. I don't think changed dramatically, because hip hop took off, which became a monster. Which in turn comes now to the term we use for everything from pop and hip hop is now urban, with country being mixed into urban, which I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. But the only thing that did change was, I think, that classic rock and roll kind of got moved out of where it was, because it has changed a bit. You got metal, and something's changed after Metallica. And so you got some of the changes in genres, but EDM picked up. EDM was the biggest festivals of the year are EDM festivals, but yet it is one genre that is not played on commercial radio.
Unless you have someone that's I mean, unless like you can break through like someone like a Zed or a Tiesto or
But look what Zed did. Zed was a genius, complete genius. I love the guy and his work, because he goes out and does exactly what I do. I would find the best female vocalist, bring them in. The one with Foxes. I mean, come on. Goes and finds her off. No one in the United States at the time really knew who she was. She comes storming in, and her unique vocals took that song to a whole new level.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got all these different things in the way it goes. How hard has it been as a producer over these years to maintain the changes and stick with the times? Because you and I both know nothing stays the same. Every 2 years, everything changes. If not every 6 months, the sound starts to change. How hard is it on the production side to maintain that same quality from the people walking off the street and those in the industry? Tough.
Maintaining the quality is I always want to strive to better the previous record that I did, like personally. And I think, maintaining that quality, I always have I need to have, whether something wins or gets nominated for a Grammy, I want to have it at that level of quality every time I put something out. As far as where the ego comes into, when I first moved out to LA, I was like, I'm only working with bands and I'm into this indie rock thing and I love these groups and Death Cab for Cutie and all these groups like Weezer, like that's my thing and that's what I want to do. And then you kind of pigeonhole yourself a little bit, right? And the music that I listen to, and I tell people this all the time, the music that I listen to isn't necessarily always the music that I make. When I listen to, when I'm working on a record, if I'm working with a country artist or a dance artist or a rock artist, I'll listen, or a blues artist, I'll really invest myself into that genre to really get all the details right. But as far as a consumer, I've really broadened my spectrum, and I'll listen to anything and everything, whatever, anybody, whatever my mood fits. But as far as a human, on the human level, when I realize that I need to expand my horizon and work with different artists, and David Longoria was someone who's you really need to start widening your horizons, because that's how you eat, is you have to work with different people to make some money, but also it's if you look at things as 12 notes and not it's so much these particular things, it's all the same 12 notes. Yeah. It's just, they're just put in a different order and in a different way and in a different style to whatever these things are. And then also you have to look at it as far as from a producer standpoint. Now, when I make my own music, I have a different concept than when I'm producing for someone else, because if I'm producing for a vocalist, say, and it's a pop vocalist, I have to really think in the terms of that artist. I can't think in the terms of me. I have to, because they're the one who's going to have to sing that song the rest of their life, especially if it's a big hit, hopefully, and I think that when I look at things that way, and it's not about me, it's about the artist, it's about the music. I started approaching things so differently as a producer, and it really opened up so many more, creative flows in the way that I work and how I work and what I do. And I took the limitations off. And I think, those self-imposed limitations, which a lot of artists have and a lot of producers have, tend to put us in a box and we're only going to do this. It's well, the industry is growing. We were talking earlier, before the interview about how, streaming has taken over and how it's so different, when hold on one second. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'll have to. Hold on. Tom, could we pause? Are you able to edit? Or is that...
I can edit. This is no big deal.
Okay.
It's easy.
Sorry. Let me just.
All easy to do.
Hold on one second. I just have to take care of that really quick. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. That's why I record these things. It makes it so easy to go in and edit stuff. plus I'm not using the video. I only use the audio. Video is always just remember we did them by phones before.
Yeah.
God, it was so hard because you always dropped on top of each other. When I did them with Bickler, it was so hard to try to do interviews by phone back in the day because everyone would trip over each other.
Yeah. So I apologize for that. But anyway, where I was going before that is that I think really it is, it comes down to taking the self limitations off and going with the flow. You don't have to change who you are as an artist. You have to be true to who you are as an artist always, but look at the things that are changing and go with go with the times, with whether it's streaming, whether it's, the guitars are in tune now where they used to not be, like things like that. I know that's the joke, but at the same time, it's being open to new horizons and allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to do those things, because that's where, you can be more successful than if you're just like so rigid or so stubborn into what you want to be, because you might open yourself up to something like doing EDM, dance music. That's not something I necessarily saw myself doing, but I was like, wow, I actually really enjoy this. This is something that I really like. I could feel super creative, especially doing remixes. You can be really, really creative and do things that I didn't know I was really capable of doing. And if I didn't allow myself to get to there, I don't know if I'd ever been able to do that and have the successes that I had in that world,
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand it. Because EDM, like I said, EDM has a cult following, 100% cult following. That like I said, the biggest festivals every year have been historically for at least 10, 15 years have been EDM festivals. And Detroit has one of the biggest ones every year.
Yeah.
And I've gone several years in a row. And I'll tell you what, it's the most energy, the most togetherness. People, there's no fights. It is all quite an interesting, very unique experience in music. It's several different stages that I think that bring people together. Like I've always said, music speaks volumes.
Yeah. And they have like EDM, the dance world has that term plural, right? Like it's, the togetherness, peace, love, understanding, like really, people are there to really enjoy the music. And I think even still, like even rock shows or things like that, there's a camaraderie that we all have.
Yeah.
And when it comes to art and music and stuff like that. And I do think though, definitely over the past 10 years or so that people have really seen a lot of cross genre things going on. And I think a lot of people are fans of artists like Taylor Swift who wouldn't have been fans of Taylor before, or even, someone like a Metallica or even a Zed or someone like there's a lot of, cross pollination there with the way that music is. And I think that's amazing for the industry. I think that there's going to be so many more, interesting collaborations as the years go on, because people aren't afraid to do it anymore, and I think that, and audiences are very accepting of it, and that's obviously you're going to have your purists here and there, but as far as like the cross section of listeners, America or, the world, there's definitely a lot of, similarities as far as what people's, tastes can go in different things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Now, moving into DAWs, I mean, you got Pro Tools has been the king for years because most of everybody in most studios pretty much built their studio around Pro Tools because it was king for so many years. There's been some changes of it. What is your favorite one to use?
I love Digital Performer. It's one of the ones that I actually learned on that. I love Reason. They have been really amazing in sponsoring me. And Propellerhead is a great company. so both of those, and they work really, really well together, and they both have, very interesting, things about how they work and what they do. And now that I said that, I don't know if I should. There's be a lot of editing there.
Yeah, no, we take that out.
Who cares? But I think the thing with Jaws is that it's very interesting, how I guess Pro Tools is always going to be the industry standard, for every studio. That's how people learn. That's what they teach in school.
Yeah.
But I know so many people who use Logic. I know so many people who use
It's
Digital Performer or Reason or what's some other Cubase or Fruity Loops or Ableton. Like, people love Ableton because you can do so many live things.
Fruity Loops is the biggest thing in Europe.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but it is. It's their number one thing.
Because it's really it's so user friendly to do dance music on it, and like EDM, and Europe has so much dance and EDM, that style of music that it's just made for it. And the same thing with Ableton. Like, some of these softwares are made for producers who are essentially producing on the go or producing, in their home studio situations or whatever, where they're making that style of music. So those companies and Reason's one of them as well, where they really have noticed that, and they know what their clientele is. So they're really going to, cater to that, you know what I mean? And, and I think that when one software comes up with something, whether it be, time stretching or have a built-in, Melodyne or Auto-Tunes thing, or their built-in plugins are really, really powerful. The next ones are like, okay, you're doing that, I'm going to do this. And so I think really when it comes down to software, I do think it comes down to more of a personal preference, because a lot of them are interchangeable, integrated now. And it's almost what you learn on is what you kind of stick with. I think
it seems to be the thing. Like that, we use them all, pretty much all of them at the studio all the time. And it's like you're constantly, interchanging stuff in between, because most of your artists are bringing you tracks or their vocals, and we don't know what they're using. So it was best off, I'm sure you run into this all the time. If someone brings you vocal tracks from somewhere to play, into the studio, and you're like, well, you're trying to get the software they have to be able to convert, so we're trying to use the different things and trying to be able to be, set up so you're able to cater to them, so you didn't turn them away. But it's amazing how many people nowadays are thinking that their home studios are better than actual studios, because there's a big difference still in sound quality, even though there's some people go out and spend the money. But unless you got a room that's got the correct dimensions, the different levels,
angles, the floating, all the stuff.
And it's very tough, but there is I've heard some pretty good stuff from home studios and that have come in, and you'll be able to do things. Now, of course, you don't, in the old days back where the whole band has to come into the studio and cut these, cut the record. Nowadays, it's things are changing, and you don't need everybody in the studio to do it, let alone which we were discussing beforehand. AI is changing the field dramatically for way things are being done, and at a fast pace. I mean, AI is since January has introduced so much that I don't know where the next 6 months are going to go with it, because, you pretty much don't need anything. You can have AI create the whole track, and you can copyright it from the AI, which is kind of scary, exciting, and scary at the same time.
It is, but I think when it comes with this, here's my thought on AI too, is that it's an amazing technology, but it's not. But it's only taking things that have already been done and recreating.
No creativity.
Whereas when you have a human element added to it, it's we are very unique in the sense that we each of us have one thing that's completely different than everybody else, and that's our brain. Like our mind is so different. I think way differently than you do. You think differently than the people that you were like we have so much. We come from all these different places on that. There's nothing that would ever. It could come close, but I just don't feel like it can ever recreate that
passion, emotion
thing. Yeah, the passion, the emotion, and just the the vulnerability of where someone is in a moment, and those things that we really relate to. I that's just my thought. I think it works for so many things, but I think there's always going to be a limitation to what it can do.
I agree. I honestly believe it will fizzle out before it gets too much traction, because I think you're right. There's that missing element of uniqueness, individuality, and the emotion, because everybody puts into their music between the vocalists, the players, and you said it best with the unique things that happen, how they play, the moment. I think it was probably the best thing, probably the best word to say it, in the moment, what people do. And sometimes some of the wrong things you do in a session can be the most turn out to be
Look
the
at
best
the
Beatles thing. exactly. And those things can specify what if a song will become a hit or not a hit. I mean, we all know the hook makes you come back. I mean, Blues Traveler made that quite evident, that the hook will always make you come back. But I think that the sound is what, I mean, the vocals, not many people, I'm one of the few people who probably listen to lyrics. Most people don't. They listen for the beat and how they can.
I don't know. I think that what's interesting, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I think that a lot of people listen differently, because I could talk to a female and they will know the lyrics like of every Taylor Swift song that's ever been written. It's a really good example. And I think that I honestly feel like it comes down to the person. You know what I mean? I think the person, I get what you're saying. I think a lot of people are moved by the beat. I think, sometimes that's what catches someone onto a song, but I do think that the lyrics really touch people. And I think that, with music, it's communication, it's something that every songwriter looks at it like, how am I communicating my story? And I think with someone who writes a heartbreak song, they could look at it and there's been millions of heartbreak songs that have been written. But there's certain words and certain ways that and each person gets their own. If it's a really good song, someone can really take their own meaning from what that is. You know what I mean? Or
one sentence can drive them into it. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that I think that's amazing that you bring up like reading lyrics, because I do think that that's such an important thing. And I think that's an important thing because I do feel like there oftentimes are artists out there that feel like, well, no one really listens to lyrics, so I'll just, I'll say something and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it's, but at the same time is that can be art too.
There's so many songs out there that it's been like cuckoo cuckoo. I mean, no one knew what the hell that meant for all this time until they've started.
Yeah. But yeah, there is a lot being said of hearing, and I think going back to what you said, I do feel like listening to that beat, when sometimes if the beat kicks in, what Michael Jackson's like a great example, right? Like, like when the beat comes in, it's like it grabs you. So it has to be catchy too, But I do feel like you don't want that letdown when those words come in.
Yeah,
that's the greatest songs are the ones that we really all relate to. Not they're all always super melodic, but I think lyrically we can all relate to them in one way or another, or at least put ourselves in that. I was listening to Stevie Wonder the other day, and he has a song called "Living for the City," right?
Yeah.
And it's a song about a young man who moves to the city and is a young black man, and just the struggles of the 70s of what he was going through, and that I personally would never have that experience. But if Stevie didn't write that song, I would never really maybe not know that experience. So it's like these are things that are. I guess I'm like you. I listen to the lyrics, but it's really like it gets you thinking a certain way, and could people really gravitate towards really great storytelling, and I think that's what really great songs can do.
Well, Harry Chapman, he had such a great storytelling thing, back in the 70s. Driving backwards a little bit, but look at his storytelling, and all his music was based off of these stories that, there were kind of sometimes hard luck stories, but they were very unique stories. I mean, getting high in his taxi cab. It was flying high in his taxi cab. It was but the story, you've got a beginning and an ending and a complete story all in his music and all the times. And, some of the best storytellers have been some of the best music. I mean, Michael Jackson did an extremely good job at his music. And that, I mean, look at Thriller. It's still on top of the world for most of the way. Madonna did that so well in her first couple albums. And then, of course, she went to more of a dance music now because of who and where she's at in the London scene. But most people outside of the music scene in that scene would not know this, but when it was introduced to the US, it seemed different, but it was a huge hit in the music scene. So you get all these people who have, look at her and her transition and through her storytelling. Taylor Swift's obviously the phenomenal storyteller in her music. We're never going to get back together. Again, it's such a great song, and that had a beginning and an ending.
Yeah, and sure did.
And again, it was a very ending, and but it had such great vibes in the fact that it could draw you in. And you're right. I think that is one of the, but some of the best ones, Motown. Most of the music in Motown, again, it something that hasn't been seen since the 60s. God, there's so much great music that was accommodated over the years that I think that today's music has a harder time comparing to some of the older music, only for the fact that I think musicians back then and artists were true musicians, where they had to learn the instrument and learn the music, where today it's a little bit more accessible for artists not to have to know everything and being able to do their craft without having the same, having to have that classical training per se as they had. And I think that, but it still didn't lose its, appeal. If you had to pick one artist that you could ever work with, living or dead, living or alive, or living or dead, excuse me, screwed that one up quite a bit. Who would you pick?
I'm probably Stevie. I think that, he would be amazing to work with. Yeah. That list can go on forever, to be honest, because as you're talking, I think of so many more, but I really do think of like someone that I probably would be really, really kind of almost in awe, starstruck being in the room. It would probably be Stevie, to be honest.
He was one of the best. God, there's so many. I mean, that whole genre of that music, it's still moving today. It's timeless.
Yeah.
It is one of the musics I could say that could completely stand the test of time. All they have to do is, if in 50 years they could increase, I don't know what in 50 years we're going to have in peak, since it's increased. Because listening to 80s music, I thought it was fast back then, but listening to it today, it's like you want to get out and push a little bit, because it compared to today's music, it isn't as fast beat as it was. It's funny how music has trended that direction. It seems to be a much faster, harder beat compared to going backwards. But I don't know. I don't know where 50 years is going to bring us. I don't even know what 5 years is going to bring us.
And there's an interesting thing too, Tom, that is that there's so many elements that have been done before.
That's true. They're coming back.
Yeah, and it's not like these songs sound exactly like this artist or this or that, but it's like, oh, like you could listen to something on the radio now and be like, oh, that's interesting. That I feel like I've heard that before. And you listen, it's like, oh, they're using like a Moog or something, something that has inspired them, and I think that would and even genres, dance music, a really good example. House music today, like the elements of house music are the same elements that were in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and so it's like the basic elements, but the songs are so different. The production's different, but they all have the traditional things to them. And I feel like jazz is always like a really cool genre because with jazz, the essence of jazz is, take it where you want to take it. It goes where it goes, and I'm improvising and I'm taking it where it's going to take it, and you're going to follow me or you're not. But this is what I'm doing. And but blues is a great genre because blues has the elements that are always blues. It's a 12-bar blues. Like all these songs are 12-bar blues, but it's the emotion of the artist and the lyrics, like you were talking about, in that. The emotion of like, someone like a B.B. King ripping on the guitar that just like really get like you feel the pain. Lucille is singing that pain on the guitar. That he's playing, and it's just I often that's going back to the AI thing. It's like that's just something that can never be recreated.
No, they can be mimicked, but it cannot come from that passion, that energy. That soul, per se.
Exactly.
And I agree. Without jazz, without the blues, we wouldn't have any music. Truly. I mean, of course, if we didn't have classical, we wouldn't have any music. But blues and jazz really are the foundations of everything we have today in most instances. And there's only so many notes that everyone can play with, and it's tough. That's why all the music's starting to sound more and more similar, because how many times can you put so many different notes and so many melodies together before it starts sounding similar? And that's, I think, going to be another, in 50 years, maybe the problem we have, because if everything's worried about what does it sound like in copyright and everyone's suing each other on those things, it is going to become more and more difficult as more and more, as we were discussing before this, hundreds of thousands of songs daily released digitally across the world. That's a lot of music.
It's a lot of music, but at the same time, the fact that it's existed for the existence of mankind, and we're still coming up with new stuff is pretty cool.
It is. It's again back to the creative side of humanity. Their brains think differently. We hear something differently. Each person interprets something differently.
Exactly.
So, last question: if you had any advice for anyone new coming into production, what would be your best advice for them?
Learn as much as you possibly can. Be a sponge. Really be a sponge, and be open. Like we talked earlier, just be open to new things, and also just be creative as possible. Do screw up, mess up, because then you learn more. Like really dive into it. Don't be afraid if someone's going to like it or not. And I think that that will come, the details and all those things of what, goes into making a hit record and so forth will come, because, that's a long process of learning things. But if you don't start somewhere and you don't start learning as much as possible and really kind of, experimenting with different things, you'll sell yourself short. And I really think that's what it comes down to is if you really want to get out there and have a unit, all the artists that we love, whether they're producers or recording artists, they all have a very unique identity. And we know when we hear a Taylor Swift song, we know when we hear a Zedd song, we know when we hear something that Quincy Jones has produced, or whatever. And that comes from trial and error. That comes from really being expressive and doing the things that that are really truly you. And then, see those details and work with people who really understand those details to refine it and get it to where it's going to be, awesome, so to speak.
Yes, this always works out well. And I'm sure the other thing you would say to artists is make sure you're prepared before you walk into the studio. Do not write while you're in the studio. Make sure you have everything up to date. Because I think that's one of the things we find that happens at times, that people end up at the studio because they think they want the inspiration there, but then they find it's more difficult to get things done if they don't have something prepared before they walk in. That's one of the things I've discovered people have just struggled with over the years. I don't know how it is in LA. But
yeah, well, I think, there's a lot to be said for that. And there's a lot. It depends, if you're new, I would say bring in some, be prepared. Some people like Paul McCartney could probably walk into a studio and just without anything and just start writing. But,
he's an icon.
But I think there's definitely a lot to be said for that, and being open, and don't come in so much with a narrow-minded view of things, because most likely you're going to get your socks knocked off of by someone who's in that room that just like shows you something that you've never even thought before, or
always be prepared for that, because there's always things will change. Never be stuck on something because everything can change.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, this has been great. I'm having you as a guest. It is always fun. We got to get together more often to talk. I am going to get a round table one point of a bunch of people in the industry together in one talk. So that should be a little bit more interesting. I would love to have you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Some all different sections of the industry and talking about the industry. So that'll be a lot of fun. And again, thank you for being on. Everyone, follow Robert online on social media, and definitely support all his projects. And I can tell you this from personal experience, regardless of what it is that he puts out or is part of, no matter how big or small, he has the same enthusiasm on every one of them. He really does.
You have to love what you do,
Yes, you got to love what you do. Exactly. You got to love music. So again, thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.